host Soli is back in the house, and we got another exclusive geekdom favorite. We got tie-in author James Swallow. How are you, sir?
Hey, Cam. Thanks for inviting me on the show. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. BAFTA nominated and recently featured on the Bestseller Experiment podcast. It's my turn to take a crack at this talent. So you have, again, you've done it all. You've done your own material. You've done all these other tie-ins. You've just before we kind of get into this, you've kind of been on kind of some of the same kind of go-to authors for tie-in material, kind of like David Mack, Peter David, Max Allan Collins, even Timothy Zahn and Kevin J. Anderson. How big do you think that list is now with all the tie-in novelizations?
Well, you know, I mean, to begin with, let me say I'm flattered to be included on a list with those writers because they're all very, very talented guys. And, you know, as well as writing this stuff, I read this stuff too, right? So those are all guys who've written stuff that I absolutely admire, you know. Keeps me humble, you know, working alongside people like that, because when you're in the same sphere as those sort of people who are constantly kind of bringing their A game to everything that they work on, you do not want to be the guy who kind of drops the ball, right? You know, you do not want to be the one to go, yeah, he's not quite as good, you know. So it encourages me to kind of do the best I can, you know.
You can describe your job profession too. You're like, well, where do I begin? I'm losing you. How do I describe my job title?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I always say, if you ask me what I do for a living, I just call myself a writer of stuff. And, you know, some of that stuff is original fiction. Some of it is tie-in fiction where I work in other people's toy boxes, as it were. I like to write in different spheres. I like trying different types of writing. So I've done books, I've written radio drama, I've written video games. I've been doing some comic book stuff, short fiction, long form fiction. I like doing that because I always feel like when you write in a different kind of style, it's like you're using a different set of tools out of your toolbox. And it improves you as a writer, so that, you know, you go back and you do a different thing and you go, okay, well, what did I learn from writing a comic book? This thing. Okay, how can I put that into work I'm going to do in a novel or work I'm going to do in a video game? So it's a great experience to be part of that and to work in tie-ins and to work, as I say, you know, working kind of other people's toy boxes. That's a real gift for someone who is a diehard geek like me, right? Because I'm talking about fictional worlds here that me personally, I've got a lot of joy out of over the years. You know, the different franchises that I've grown up watching and had as part of my kind of sci-fi fantasy landscape. And now people will say, well, hey, would you like to tell a story in that world as well? And I'm like, absolutely, yeah. You know, to get to be part of the kind of the cadre of people who contribute a little bit of that to that kind of, if you think of that crazy quilt of stories that each big franchise has, it's like, well, I can point at a little piece of that and go, yeah, I helped that bit there. I made that little piece. And that is really great for me to be able to kind of give a little something back to it.
Absolutely. Every once in a while, though, a contract's going to come along where you got to brush up and do some extra research on something. What do you do when you've got to familiarize yourself with a particular subject, but you don't have, 50 hours of TV to watch?
That's a good question. I mean, most of the IPs that I've worked on, the intellectual properties, I should say, using that phrase, are things I'm already kind of familiar with. So Star Trek, for example, is a good example of that. That's a franchise that I started watching Star Trek in the original series in reruns back in the 1980s. When I was a kid, I would come home from school and turn on the TV before dinner, and there would be like Captain Kirk and the crew of the Enterprise. So for me, that's kind of like my first fandom, pretty much. So when it comes to writing Star Trek, for me, that's like kind of putting on a pair of comfortable shoes, comfortable old slippers. It's
slide through this even with the new being added,
and it feels like coming home again for me. So for that, I don't have to do a lot of research because a lot of it is kind of up there in my kind of nerd memory bank. But with other franchises, I mean, what I do is I just try and steep myself in it as much as I possibly can. So if there are like 50 hours of TV, I try and watch as much of that as I can. If there's encyclopedias, if there are other books, or even if there are just kind of people who are like lore experts, I'll listen to them and like, okay, what are the interesting pieces of background for this? What's the sort of like the core elements of the world? But the most important thing I try to do is I try to find the kind of tone of it, what is the essential texture of that world. It's different writing Doctor Who and it's Star Trek, even though they're both kind of like science fiction shows. It's different for me to write a Warhammer story than it is for me to write a Halo story, because even though they're military science fiction, they're very, very different in terms of tone. And it's always a question of finding that the sound, the voice of it, because I think when you're a fan, what that is instinctively. And if someone presents you with a story that is off, it rings that wrong note, you're like, this isn't working, So
exactly,
that is the thing I'm always searching for.
And that's a good point too, because with your Halo and Warhammer tie-ins, it's like I was playing Halo, I never played Warhammer, but I could tell it was just exploding because just every other comic book store had even an RPG tie-in to what's already an established computer game. And games, now it's even harder to keep up, just there's new video game systems. How do you familiarize yourself with that?
Well, I'm a gamer. I mean,
nice.
I've always been a gamer. I'm dating myself here, right? But I kind of grew up with the age of video games, right? So, I was playing arcade games back in the 80s, and then I became a PC gamer for a while, and then I got too lazy to do that. And now I'm a console casual, right? So, and that got me into, part of my writing career got me into writing video games. And so I always say to my accountant, well, I need to keep playing video games. I need to keep buying games because I have to keep up with them. So, that's yeah. So it's like tax deductible for me. I need to buy a new PlayStation, right? So he's like, "Are you sure?" Okay, but so yeah. I mean, so I try to play as many games as I can, to just kind of keep my sort of finger on the pulse of what's going on in the industry. And I get maybe I have like a couple of regular gaming days. I have like every Thursday night I play online games with my friends, just as a kind of social thing. Currently, we're playing Battlefield 2042 right now. But we played loads of different kind of stuff. Any kind of team games where we can just get in there and kind of have some fun and blow off some steam. But I also will try and take a few hours every week just to do a little bit of gaming on my own to try out something interesting and new. So I'm always trying to keep up to date with that, and I enjoy it as well. It's not just a chore; it's something that as a gamer, I'm always excited. Well, what's the cool new thing? What's coming up next?
That's lovely. And have you ever been asked to help out with something like Battlefield or Call of Duty tie-ins? Because I know they did some comic book for those.
No, that's I've never done. I think the closest thing I've done to I've a first-person shooter type game is I did work on a very early iteration of Killzone 2, if you know that franchise.
Yes.
That was going to be like Sony's Halo killer, but it wasn't quite as successful as I hoped.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a long project.
But
yeah, it was a fun game. I mean, but it was a crazy project to work on because this is back in the day of PlayStation 2. That shows how long ago it was, right? It was going to be, it was going to be one of the last PlayStation 2 titles, and the game was delayed so long it became one of the first PlayStation 3 titles. And a lot of we worked on a ton of story for that, and it all got kind of thrown in the bin and junked, and they started again with a completely new crew. So I'd say like maybe 2%
at least you got to stay on as opposed to thanks.
Well, I didn't. That was it. My contract ended, and they were like, "Oh, thanks. Here's your." It was kind of like, I remember the game director called me up, and he's like, "Well, we love the work you did. Here's your check. Thanks very much for all your hard work. We've all been fired." Oh, wait, what? And he was like, "Yeah, whole new team's coming in. We're going to start again from scratch." And then I think they did, but they did keep some of the stuff that I wrote in there. So like I say, there's maybe like kind of 1-2% of the dialogue in that game is written by me. So I can still point at it and go, I did that little piece, but yeah, it's like the games industry is crazy. The kind of the amount of money they spend and the amount of work they get out of people is just sometimes it's insane.
Absolutely. Without naming some names, it's actually been kind of sad just seeing what video game developers have, even before we had a writers guild strike internationally. It just seemed like there was a lot of game places that were becoming a little toxic or not paying their people write. Mythic Quest, the TV show on Apple, has actually made fun of a lot of that, those kind of tropes. Gamers
Yeah,
complain about everything, and developers aren't sure how to please their fans, except just kind of yell at people, do something, for 24
yeah.
hours.
I mean, crunch is real, right? It's a terrible thing. It's people
Big
really
crunch.
get worked very, very hard, and it's because so many people are passionate about games. They're willing to kind of go that extra mile. And unfortunately, there are some companies, not all of them. I stress there are a lot of good game studios out there, but there are some companies who will take advantage of that and work people to the bone. And I think it's, at the end of the day, burning out that kind of talent is not good for the industry, because if you get really talented people and you just kind of destroy all of that energy that they have in the first project, those people are going to drop out of the industry and go somewhere else, and you're going to lose that talent. You need to nurture it, and if that
Nurture the
means
talent.
maybe taking a little bit longer. But of course, the thing is the games industry has fostered a kind of culture that gamers expect. Well, I want it now. I want it now, and it's like,
Yeah,
and it's like you can't have it now. It's not as easy to produce stuff as it looks like from the outside.
it's still happening. It's just like, and then with this AI controversy, we're still getting people who say, "Oh, we're paying them too much." It's like, well, then how do you expect a quality product if you keep taking shortcuts?
Yeah, let me tell you, anybody out there who says that, you're wrong. You are not paying them enough, right? People working in the game industry do not get paid enough
They
for the
get,
hard work that they do.
it's already bad enough that they got to deal with actors and tell directors notes, and even like you say, I mean, Pixar seemed to be kind of one of the first back in the day. I know it's movie TV wise, but where they were telling everyone, hey, if you want this movie to look good, you got to wait another year for the graphics to render. And now we're at a point where we can find shortcuts in getting the graphics to render, but sometimes, stuff can crash.
Yeah. I mean, I think if people want good quality product, it's at the end of the day, they got to understand maybe this is going to take a little longer to bake, because I think it was, Kojima, the Metal Gear Solid man, he was
Yeah.
the guy who said something like, I think it was like his quote was like, a bad game gets remembered forever, but like a good game will be worth it. Good game will be worth the wait. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely, man. I agree 100% with that.
He's been, I respect him as soon as when the infamous Yuval was trying to adapt every other game, and he's like, "Nope, you're not touching my property. I already know what you are. You don't understand how to make movies. You definitely don't know how to adapt a game. So I will put up every single cease and desist. You will not even have a dialogue about adapting our games." But
Yeah, I saw that Far Cry movie. That was
ooh,
interesting.
yeah.
Moving on, though. Right?
Moving on.
Moving on.
What are some tropes about being a writer that you've had to break the ice and reveal what outdated and trivial facts those have become, like writer's block, for instance?
Oh yeah, okay. People say to me like, "Oh, how do you deal with writer's block?" And I always say, "No such thing."
Is not
It's
real. Yeah.
it feels like there's a lot of kind of the tropes around being a writer. A lot of them, these kind of romanticized ideas of what it is to be somebody who writes, is that we sit in our kind of lofts, and and we get the vapors and we stare at them and I go, "Oh, my muse has not arrived today. Oh no, I must take to my fainting couch." And wait for my muse. My muse, she comes in at 9 a.m. She punches the clock like everybody else. She takes her lunch break. She goes home at the end of the day. Because if you want to be a working writer, you have to treat it like everybody else's job. And I always say, because if you want it to be a career, and for me, definitely, it is a career. I mean, it can be a hobby. It can be something you do for fun, and I respect people who do that. But that's not what I do. This is my job 24/7. I do not have another job that supports me. I write 5 days a week for
Good.
that pays my rent, that pays my mortgage, that pays my food. That's the job that I do.
Pays the
And so
agent manager.
and so I have to treat it like anybody else would treat a job. And so when someone says, "Do you get writer's block?" I say, "Well, does a plumber get plumber's block? Does a plumber wake up in the morning and go, 'Oh man, I just can't put another toilet in. I can't do any more sinks today. Oh, it's too much for me.'" It's like, a dentist doesn't get dentist's block, a baker doesn't get baker's block, right? And it's the
Maybe
same
they're
way.
just a blockhead.
It's like everybody has a day at their job, no matter what it is, where you just think, "Oh man, I just don't want to do this today." And it's like, that's just what it is to be human. That's just the nature of things, right? And you have to treat it like just the same way. So if I have a day where I wake up and I think like, "Oh, I'm just not feeling it," too bad. get to work, get your ass in chair, hands on keyboard, right? And just start writing. And even if I work on something that day and I get to the end of the day, I look at it and go, this is not my best work. That's fine, because I know I can come back tomorrow and I can fix it and I can edit it and I can make it better in the revisions. But the important thing is just to keep on working. If you feel you are blocked, maybe it's something wrong with your work. Maybe there's something about it you haven't done right. Maybe you haven't plotted it correctly. Maybe the characters aren't kind of clicking with you. Go back and look at what you've done. But it isn't this sort of mythological thing that kind of like a cloud passing in front of the sun. Suddenly you may not write. It's not like that. It's just get to work, force your way through.
Get it.
That's my kind of ethos with that.
Absolutely. So I've seen that you gotten some fanfare for Warhammer 4000, as well as the Judge Dredd material. What fan mail would you say you've received the most, though, overall?
Yeah, well, the Warhammer stuff, I did a lot of work on that
much.
over the
You got
years.
like 16 titles on there.
Yeah, and it's an interesting franchise to work on because it has a very passionate fan base, and I say that in quotation marks. It's a lot of the people I've met in Warhammer fandom are really just amazing people with some incredible stories.
Because you got so many gaming communities which have kind of gone out of sequence. Like Activision, for instance, kind of dissed its fans when they were making Call of Duty, and then the Call of Duty fans were kind of trolling each other, eating each other alive. So to have a friendly fan base and geekdom is it's everything.
But of course, the thing is that's not everybody. There is always the toxic element, and I have had my encounters with that toxic element. I've had death threats from people. I have had people who have hated my work and have said that they're going to do horrible things to me, and my reaction
understand this character. I'm going to kill your house. But
my reaction is kind of like, bring it, and let me tell you, no one has ever brung it. No one has ever brung it. And it's because
always funny when it's a 6-year-old talking smack and you're like, where are your parents?
I mean, I've had, I have met grown men who haven't been happy with my work, and I always just kind of engage it directly and say, look, you know what, if you don't like my work, we can have a conversation about it, and I will happily tell you why I do what I do, and we can disagree and be respectful of each other. There's it doesn't have to be flipping tables and stuff. We can be an adult about it. And if you don't want to do that, then we'll see you bye. You go your way, I'll go mine. Because at the end of the day, I just do my work and try and live it down. And I know the fact that I am never going to make everybody happy. That's the thing about a fandom, right? Is that there's always going to be people who have an idea of what a particular character or universe is. They have that head canon, right? And you cannot look inside that person's head and go, okay, I will write a story that fits perfectly with what you want. You just write the story that you can write that fits with the brief that you have been given as a writer, and that is the long and the short of it. And I say to people, if you don't like my work, just put it down and move on, because there's a ton of other books out there that maybe you will like. Go ahead, go read those. Don't waste your time disliking me. It's because I'm still here, I'm still writing, I'm still doing it. I feel the same way myself when if I come across work that I don't like, I don't want to waste time hating on it. I just think, what, this isn't for me. And if someone asks me my opinion, I'll say, that wasn't to my tastes. I just go and find something that is to my taste. I'd rather celebrate what I enjoy than denigrate what I hate. It just seems like a waste of energy.
Yeah, it's not constructive, that's for sure. Any college campuses or other online studies you would recommend for people in this day and age who still want to actually have a writing career?
Well, I would say that, I didn't go to college to learn to be a writer. I don't say to people like, I know there's some people who say, well, you've got to have a degree of some sort. You got to have a degree in literature or this, that, and the other to be a writer.
Or you got to just know someone.
That's not true. If you want to write, then just write. If you feel you want to go and get an education, then by all means you go do that, because you're going to learning stuff is great, right? Because if you're always going to learn something,
make an impression.
Even if you learn something that is kind of negative and you come away from it with a negative experience, well, that's great. You've still learned something. You've something that's going to form your ability and your skill as a writer. But the way you become a good writer is you write. You know, I was watching that documentary on Netflix, the one about Arnold Schwarzenegger talking about his career. Yeah. And in the
Yeah.
first episode, he talks about becoming a bodybuilder. And he says, like, you know, he just went into the gym and he just started training. And it's like, it's obvious, right? That's how he became a bodybuilder. It's like,
Nothing
that's
could
how you
stop him.
become it's the same thing. That's how you become a writer. Sit down and write. What I hear a lot from like kind of young new writers, people who are just starting out, is they say, oh, I worked on a thing and I got kind of halfway through it and I didn't like it, so I abandoned it and I threw that piece of work away and I've started working on something else. And I say, well, nobody wants someone who can't stick the landing. Is, you
Yes.
know, all you're going to have is a box full of half-written stories. You're never going to be 100% happy with what you do, but the key to it is finish what you start. Finish it. That if I give no other advice to anyone who wants to be a writer, it's those two words: finish it. Because once you do the thing that you want to do, once you've written that story, even if you get to the end and you go, I'm not happy with that, that's good, because you've learned how to be critical of your own work. And you can improve when you do the next thing and the next thing. And that's how you do it. It's an iterative process. It is like building muscles. It's like, you know, if you exercise it, it gets stronger. If you don't, it gets flabby, it atrophies. It's just as simple as that.
Totally. Oh man, that's some good stuff. And have you tried to get into? You have a wonderful voice, but have you tried to get
Thank you.
into any public speaking or screenwriting side gigs as well?
I've done. I think I have a good voice for radio. I do a lot of radio drama stuff like that. So I love doing radio stuff, and I've had some fun with that. Pretty much every time I've written a radio project, I am in it somewhere. I do a little Alfred Hitchcock moment, right? So if you hear somebody being shot dead or falling off a building, if you hear that kind of Wilhelm scream or somebody getting crushed underneath the wheels of a tank, that's usually me just coming on to do a little scream. So I can say, oh, there I am. That's me dying horribly right there. Yeah, you know. So yeah, you know, all that kind of thing, getting eaten by a monster or getting shot in the head or something horrible like that. That's, you know, I'm always doing things like that. I like doing, I enjoy radio and audio. I think it's a really terrific medium for storytelling because you have the best special effects budget in the world, right? Which is your listener's imagination.
Your voice, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, and you get some great voice actors, and you work with, like, you know, really talented engineers and sound effects people, musicians, and you can conjure a fantastic world just with kind of all of those different elements. And I think audio is a really great medium because it's very intimate. You know, it's kind of, you're talking directly to the listener, and it's like you're right there in their head with them. And it's almost like the listener becomes part of the story because they are creating the world as they hear it. So they're kind of complicit in the creation of the story. And I think that makes you kind of connect with a dramatic sort of plot line much more than you would if you're kind of sitting back passively and kind of looking at it on the screen.
Right. And man, radio is just good at also just reminding us, hey, it all begins with a script before we
That's very true.
these voices.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, that's an exciting experience. I mean, I remember the first time I ever worked on a radio project is I went into the recording studio. This was for the Judge Dredd franchise based on the 2000 AD comic book character.
Right.
And I had these ideas like, oh, I know, okay, this is what I want the voices to sound like, and it's going to be like this. And I had this whole kind of version of it in my head. And the director just did it completely differently. And I was like, wait, what? No. This is not how this goes. It's not supposed to be like this. And he said, can I swear on this podcast? Am I allowed to say rude words?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So he said to me, with all due respect, Jim, shut the fuck up. And he's like, you've done your job with your script. Shut up. Let me do my job. Let the actors do their job. You know, we appreciate your input, but this is as far as you go. And I thought, what? And I walked out of the room, and I went to have a cup of tea, and I stood in the green room on my own, and I sat there and I thought about it, and I thought, you know what? He's absolutely right. This is not my place to tell him how to do his job. It's not my place to tell him how to trust the actors, trust the other team members. So I went back into
doing what you want, but they're doing it in a different way, so it doesn't seem apparent at first. It's just like watching a movie half finished without the effects shots inserted.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so what I realized in that moment, it was a very important lesson for me, was just embrace that energy that the other people are going to bring. These actors come in and they put their energy on it, and the director has their direction. You know, instead of kind of going, oh, it's not how I see it in my head, you have to look at it the inverse of that and say, this is growing from the script that I create. If that's the seed, this is the plant that grows from it. And this is the flowering of this story. And now I go back and I listen to that script that I wrote back then, and I can't hear it in a different way. It's like the version that they made is the exact right version of it.
Absolutely.
I'm glad I learned that lesson very early on, because I think if I hadn't, I might have been a bit more of a dick about things. So that was, an important lesson to learn.
Like you say, I just see it in the flesh, how
Absolutely.
it all occurs.
Yeah.
How would you say you organize your days? Everyone has a process, and time management is key for everything. But how did you learn your own thing? Like, I have this much me time, I have this much, for personal time, exercise, food.
I would say, how do I organize my day badly? I should be better at it by now. I mean, generally what I do is, so I have an office in my house. And I'm lucky now that I have I have like a kind of 12-foot commute from my bedroom to my office. I used to have a day job like normal people, like regular decent human beings, but now I managed to kind of build myself a career where it's kind of like I can go into my office and I can work. So generally I'm kind of backside in my chair by 9 o'clock, and I do my kind of morning email run, check sort of like that kind of stuff. And then I get into it, and I just work a kind of 9 till 5, maybe sort of 10 till 6 day, take an hour for lunch, and
clear your mind.
Generally that's just kind of like, I will set myself a target depending on what the project is. So if it's like a comic book, it might be a certain number of pages. If it's a script, same thing. If it's a book, it might be a word count. I might say, okay, the needs of the project, if it's this long, I need to do this many days and I need to write this amount. So every day I will say, okay, your word count target for the day is X, and I will work towards that target. And I don't always make it, and I've learned not to kind of beat myself up about it if I miss the sort of mark a few times. As long as I'm not doing it every single day, that's fine, because you always kind of catch up on different days. Some days you have a bad day, some days you have a good day. And I just work my way through it. I for a long time I was working 7 days a week, and then as I've gotten further on from my career and I've had a little bit more success, I've kind of reduced that down to 6 days. And now I'm lucky enough to be working a 5-day week, which for me is kind of excellent because it's back to being like a regular person, and I can actually take my weekends off.
He's a real boy.
Yeah, it's nice. It was. I mean, I can remember when I did have a day job before I started writing full time. I would work my day job. I used to work in an industrial laboratory, not the cool kind of industrial lab with cloning dinosaurs or time machines or cyclotrons, none of that cool stuff. No, it was pretty dull. But I would come home in the evening, I would have dinner, and I would go upstairs into my room and sit there and I would write. And I would write until the kind of wee hours, and I'd go back to work the next day and I would be falling asleep in meetings.
Oh, no.
And that's kind of when I realized, like, I don't want, this is the day job. I do not want to be doing this for the rest of my life. The thing I want to be doing, the thing I love doing, is the writing thing I'm doing in the evening.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of when I decided, like, okay, I'm going to try and make this my career. And and I set myself that goal.
That's good. You actually ran into my next question. I was wondering how word counts and page numbers, how that configures. It seems like I've heard mixed takes on that. Some people pay by the word count versus by the hours put into it. How do they process that nowadays with publishers? And
it depends on the project. Like, so if I'm working on a video game project, that's a day kind of thing. So they pay me by the day. But they'll say, like, okay, we want you to do a script that's this long. How many days will that take you? And I say, okay, that's 10 days work. They're like, okay, we'll pay you for 10 days. So usually I say like 10 days plus a couple of days for revisions and stuff like that, right? With a short fiction, again, it will be like, they'll give you a set word count for it. If it's a comic book, could be like if it's an American Marvel comics kind of style, that's like 22 pages of comic book per issue. It's like how many days it take you to write that. If it's a novel, it's a different kind of thing, because generally a book, most books these days are between the 100 to 120,000 words, maybe 80,000 words at the bottom end of the spectrum. And the thing is they say, okay, well, we're going to give you, if you're lucky, you get 6 months to do it. Most of the time it's like 3. If you're a really high profile writer, if you're kind of like Stephen King, you get to take as long as you damn well want, right? But with somebody like me, like a kind of jobbing writer, right? It's like, okay, I know I've got 6 months, 4 months, 3 months maybe to write this, and I have 100,000 words to write. So it's like, okay, sit down and just start doing it. And I set myself, again, that word count target and just kind of work my way through. I edit as I go. So what I do every morning is I wake up and I edit the work I did the previous day.
Oh,
to
sweet.
kind of get, so that kind of gets me rolling. So by the time I'm writing new stuff, I kind of up to speed. But
Do you have
that's
any
just my
peers
process.
or colleagues come over and just read it aloud?
Usually what I'll do is when I'm done, when I have a draft that I think is presentable, I will pass that around to a couple of friends of mine who are other writers, people who I trust, people who have experience in the industry, you know, who will look at it and say, okay, you know, this is good, or, you know, it's a bit flabby here, or you don't resolve this character, or, you know, what have you. And I do that job for other writers as well. So we have like a little circle of people who, you know, a little circle of trust, right? We look at each other's work. But I
That's good.
generally, I don't, I wouldn't show anybody anything until I think it's good. I know some people like to workshop their stuff and they'll do it like chapter by chapter, almost kind of page by page, but not me. I have to feel like it's presentable. I
It's
couldn't just kind of go, oh,
reasonable,
yeah.
you know, and
'Cause-
as opposed to halfway done.
Yeah, I don't want to show somebody something that's half baked because for me that's kind of embarrassing. You know, I'm like, I have a reputation to uphold, right? I want it to be decent quality, and because I edit as I go, you know, that means that my work kind of takes a slightly different form to maybe a writer who would kind of just write the whole thing from start to finish, and then just go back and edit it after the fact. You know, write the whole thing and then edit everything. So people like that, you know, they have a very different process from me. I mean, I know writers who will write tens of thousands of words and then throw the whole thing away and start again because they need to kind of have that run up. And to me, I'm like, my God, why would you waste all that energy doing that? But that's their process, right? The thing about being a writer is people say, what's the right way to do it? You know, what is the formula? You know, and you know, what is the kind of the secret? You know, what is the one weird trick, right?
Like
That you
you're a
have
secret god in human form. Tell me everything.
yeah, and it's I'll tell you what the secret is. The secret is that there is no secret. And that's that's not what people want to hear, you know, but it's the truth. It's just like, it's just get down and do the work. That's all there is to it.
Get down. That's great. And how many friends would you say you've made in this industry?
You know, it's the what I found about the writers
Aside from the
industry
people
is
who pay you, obviously, but I mean,
because they're not always my friends. Yeah, it's there is I think with any group of people who've like feel like they're kind of a bit put upon this, you know, if you get a bunch of writers in a room, I guarantee you we will start whining about stuff within like 5 minutes. It's like, you know, if you work with that guy, God, he's terrible. I hate that guy.
right?
Or, oh, this job. Oh,
or maybe he didn't like you. He's fine with everybody else.
It's like, you know, you get a group of writers together and what you get is war stories about like, you know, oh, the worst job I ever had, or the worst person I ever did. Oh, you know, this terrible thing that happened. And what's great about that, and this is the thing I say again to people who want to be writers, is build your network with other people. Have that there because you need that sanity check. You know,
Always.
because stuff will happen to you and you'll be like, am I crazy? Is this just me who thinks this?
Right.
And if you're in a room by yourself, because writing is a very solitary experience, you know, you don't have a lot of interface with other people unless you're maybe like working on a TV show or something, going into a writer's room every day. If you're writing a book, it tends to be you and the editor for most of that process. And it is useful sometimes to just have other writers and go, you know, am I crazy when I think this? And because other writers will go, no, man, you're not crazy. It happened to me too. And you think, oh, that's great. You know, I feel relieved. I know I can get back to it. It's very important to have that kind of support structure around you.
Absolutely. Structure is the key word. That is for sure. Have you noticed how other people have been getting into any kind of writing industry lately? It seems like there's a few other recent hacks that people have done. People have been self-publishing books, and lo and behold, they're becoming movies. Look at The Martian.
Yeah, I mean, it's it is a weird job, right? Because there's no kind of one pathway to success.
And then each market keeps getting oversaturated. Everyone's like, Bitcoin's the future, and already it's like, nope, don't even bother.
Yeah, I
all that
mean,
shit.
I remember when Wattpad first came along, people were like, "Oh, this is how writing's going to be now, right?" And I thought that's interesting. It's like I'm not going to do that because it doesn't appeal to me, but I was like, that'll work for some people,
Right?
and it did. It did work for some people, but it didn't work for other people. And it's anybody who says to you that they have the kind of the magic rainbow bridge to success is lying, right? That it's like
Right.
it may be successful for some
Right place,
people.
right time.
Yeah, it is. I
We're
mean,
not
I
gods.
talk about people often say to me like, "Oh, I love this franchise. I'd love to write a book for that franchise. Is how does that work?" I've written sort of my fan fiction. Will it be like a kind of golden hand coming down from out of the sky, picking me up from fandom and elevating me to being a tie-in writer? And I say, no, that doesn't happen. But then again, I know someone who that did happen to. I have a friend that is exactly what happened to her. Someone read a fan fiction story that she did. She didn't even submit it. It was like someone else said, "Have you seen this?" She got a phone call from the people who were working on the official licensed franchise. They said, "You're a great writer. Do you want to do this for real? Come up to the big leagues, as it were." And she said, "Yeah." And I tell people that story and they go, "Oh, there's hope for me yet." And I say, "Well, no. What you got to realize is she was the unicorn, right? She's the black swan event, right? That is not going to happen to you. That happened once to her. It won't happen to you
No.
because every story, you ask 10 different writers how they got where they got, and they will tell you 10 different stories. For me, I started off writing for fanzines back in the day. That's how I kind of cut my teeth, just doing
Nice.
that sort of thing, fan newsletter stuff. And then I wrote articles for like genre magazines. I was
Oh,
I
that I
was
didn't know,
reviewing
my
books
dude. I wish more
and
people
that
would
kind of thing.
discuss that.
But that was like, so I was kind of like an entertainment nerd journalist, basically, and I did that for a while. And I kind of got to the point in my life where I realized that I really wanted to be, instead of writing about the people who were doing the writing, I wanted to be the person being written about.
Actually contributing to the universe instead of saying,
Yeah.
"Oh, how great it is, how holy and immortalized it is in pop culture."
I mean, it was fun for me. One of the magazines I worked on was the official Star Trek magazine. And
Yes.
and so I would interview people who were on the shows, and I would interview the actors and the directors and what have you. But I would always say to my editor, "Is like, can I talk to some of the writers? Can we talk to some of the script writers on Star Trek?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, okay, sure." And so I would go and talk to these guys, and I would secretly be getting kind of an education from them as well. So
Yeah.
I would ask them about the show, but I'd also say like, "Oh, this is very interesting. What would you do if you had a problem in Act 3 of your story?" And they're like, "Are you sneakily getting kind of answers to writers' questions?" Like, "Yes, sir. Yes, I am." And so I learned a lot from those guys. And having seen that,
They're
I
a
was like,
very healthy set of people. Ronald D.
yeah.
Moore,
Oh
Brandon
God, yeah.
Braga, and
I'm
even more. We've done even podcast features on the key Star Trek writers, everyone from DC Fontana to Jonathan Frakes,
oh
and it's just always interesting how they had to pick their teeth doing all kinds of gigs.
yeah.
I think what was it? His name always escapes me, but uh, the one who directed the most Star Trek episodes I know had prior to that been the unit production manager. So
Right.
there you go.
I mean, it's interesting you talk about Ron Moore. I remember reading. It's like I reading an article
Battlestar's
about
gonna
him.
fail.
It's like when he first started, he got his first job on Next Generation. I remember reading this article in Starlog magazine about how he'd gone from just like lucky fanboy to being picked to be on the show, and then like
Because
the
that's what they look
week
for. They
after
look
I
for
read that,
fans who knew it
yeah,
inside.
it was the week after I read that article. I was in the Roddenberry building on the Paramount lot, and I met him in the corridor, and I was like,
Oh
"Oh my
wow.
God, you're Ron Moore," and he's like, yeah," and I was like, "Wow, your story is really inspiring to me because you've done what I would like to do. Is like you stepped up and you've done it." And I was like, "What's it like?" And he's like, "Man, it's really hard work." And I remember he was super humble, but
Yeah.
and he was clearly kind of rushed off his feet. And I was like, I just shook him by the hand. I said, "Thanks for being kind of like inspirational in your own way." And he's gone on to do such great things.
Yep. Good
And
versus evil for all
yeah,
mankind. Yeah.
terrific, right, and a really nice guy. And in the years since, I did interviews and stuff with him. Talked to him about when he was working on Battlestar and stuff like that, and he remembered me, which was really nice.
That's
And
even better when they're
you
like,
know,
"Yeah, you're the guy who actually wanted to know
you're that
about my
British
stuff."
guy who who wouldn't shut the hell up. Yeah, but it was
I
but it
hope
was
he
cool.
doesn't
Yeah,
get that. That'd be
but
awful.
there's there's a lot of really talented people there on those shows who have gone on to do bigger and better and more things. Now you see
Go
that
in stages.
it's like I think that kind of era of Star Trek was an incubator for a lot of talented people who have gone on to create their own shows as well. Not just like
Absolutely.
Ron Moore, but people like Brian Fuller is another example of somebody who
Hmm.
was taught me a great deal. Is I went to pitch for Star Trek Voyager, and Brian was often the guy that I would speak to. And I remember he had this office full of kind of like crazy toys everywhere all over his desk, and he would sit there playing with these action figures while he was talking to me, and he would just like drop these nuggets of amazing kind of writer sort of wisdom. And I was like, wow, I am lucky to be in the presence of this guy, because
You ever meet Michael
he
Piller?
just stuck the stuff up. Oh yeah, Michael
Yeah.
Piller is, I
Don't you
mean,
love his philosophy? How every episode is a round of baseball. How are you going to get to the finish line? How are you going
I
to
mean,
strike out?
and the thing is I think everybody who's come up since TNG owes Michael Piller a debt of gratitude,
Oh,
because
especially for the openers and closers, and then having some of them on do it, and him having to redo it again.
but he is the guy who said, he's the guy who started up the open door policy, where he said, okay,
Yes.
if you want to come in and pitch for Star Trek and you don't have an agent, you can do it. And I did that, and I went in on that policy, and I
Sweet.
got to sell a couple of pitches for Star Trek Voyager, years down the line. I would never have had that opportunity if not for that man's generosity. I mean, it's a great loss. It's a real shame that he passed, but
Yes. Rest in
a
peace.
fantastic writer and a really nice guy who I think did a great deal for helping keep that franchise
Like you
alive. And
say, he was just a multi collaborator. I mean, who says I'm going to do a cool remake of both the book and movie version of the Dead Zone and do my own take on it, make it its own thing, and then have my son be the showrunner? that is a dedication right there.
yeah, I got to meet him when he was working on season 1 of Dead Zone, actually, and that was I just sort of shook him by the hand. I was like, man, thank you for everything you've done.
Yeah.
For just kind of like letting kind of a chancer like me kind of and all the other people like me to kind of take an opportunity. And he just said, that these TV shows, they are machines that eat ideas, and you have to keep shoveling them in like coal in the furnace, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there are people out there with great ideas, and it's like, if you can do the work, there's a place for you here. And that lesson, always stuck with me.
Absolutely. To have those lessons and you remember them just like it was in the flesh on day one. It's like, see, that's that person's also a teacher.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you kept up with Naren Shankar, who wrote a lot of Data episodes as well as the '90s Outer Limits and was showrunner on both CSI and The Expanse?
Yeah, I mean, there's somebody else there who
He
who
broke the rules. Like I was listening to How Not to Make a Movie, and it has a lot of the same guys who worked on Tales from the Dark Side and Crip, who later worked on uh, the '90s Outer Limits. And one rule they had in that writers' room was no time travel. And Naren was able to successfully break that because he has a science background. So he's like, "Here's what we're gonna do," and boom, it just made an awesome time travel episode.
Yeah, absolutely.
Man. And have there been any future collaborations you've been wanting to do for a while? Some of your brethren, where you're just like, we got to work on a project together.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because I've just finished up working on a collaboration with a good friend of mine, a fellow writer, a chap called Ben Aranovich. He and I have known each other for a long time now. So he and I
a tongue
met.
twister saying that name, Ben
Yeah.
Aranovich.
He and I met on a reboot, a failed reboot of an old British sci-fi show called Blake 7, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's kind of like,
I saw you had done some novels for that, and I actually just got into some of it this year. I can totally see why Doctor Who and Twilight Zone and Star Trek, it's in that kind of special,
definitely. I mean, it's
British sci-fi.
It's this kind of Robin Hood meets the Dirty Dozen in space kind of story, right? And we worked on that for a while. Unfortunately, we did some audio drama versions of it, but we never got the TV show off the ground. But I worked with some really, really talented, super cool people there, and Ben was one of those. And he's gone on to write this urban fantasy police procedural series called Rivers of London, which is basically about
Wow.
a regular British beat copper who gets involved in the last kind of magic using guy. Basically, becomes the apprentice of that
I'm
guy, and
looking it
it's
up
also
now. Peter Grant and
there you go, the Peter Grant series, yeah. And so
that's awesome.
it's this kind of strange blend of a kind of hard-edged police procedural series with kind of magic users and all that kind of strange stuff going on. It's kind of it's Dungeons and Dragons meets Hill Street Blues, right? It's that kind of sort of
Oh
stuff,
man.
right? And
That's pretty.
he's probably gonna be angry with me making that comparison. Other people say it's like Harry Potter became a policeman. I'm like, no, it's cooler than that, much cooler than that.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
but so he,
everyone takes a minute to get the metaphors for
yeah,
comparisons and pitching. I mean, you have to pitch something to even get it made, you know. Even
yeah,
let's say
it's
you're
true.
doing a crime, assassin, underworld thing. I know as soon as you mention that, everyone instantly goes, "Oh, just like Pulp Fiction or John Wick." And it's like you got to basically say yes, even though you're not going for that exact same kind of brisk dialogue and dark comedy.
Yeah, yeah, and
um,
so yeah, and so Ben had been working on that for a while now. He's done kind of like several novels for it, and he's also got a comic book series. And he knew that I wanted to do some more work in comics, and he said to me, "Look, why don't you come and do a Rivers of London comic book with me, and we could both have some fun with that." And so we collaborated on that, and I've just finished the writing of that. First issue is going to be coming out in a couple of months' time. It's called Here Be Dragons,
Here be
and I
dragons.
had just such a blast working on it because it wasn't like work at all. Really, I was just like hanging out with my friends, coming up with cool story ideas, and we've got some really talented artists. And the guys at the comic company were like, "Oh, we love this. Let's just go for it." And so it's been such fun doing that.
That's great.
I mean, I like some writers like to kind of sit in their corner and just do their thing on their own, and that's fine. And there are times when I like to do that as well. But I also enjoy collaborating with other people because you always get more energies. Like I said earlier about people bringing their energy to a project. You never know
Yeah,
how it's going to go. And if you work with people who are talented, I think it raises the game for everyone.
absolutely. I mean, you've raised your game. You've done the Sundowners and Mark Day. Your two original timelines. You know, no one can touch that. You know,
Yeah.
you get to decide where that storyline goes, and you finally. But when did you finally feel like I'm comfortable now? In my own skin, I can justify my own world with its own rules.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Sundowners series, that was like the very first thing I ever wrote. That's way back in like
Oh, one, yeah.
2001 when I did that, so and that was kind of this YA steampunk Western kind of thing.
I gotta
And
ask, who would win in a fight? Gunslinger Tyler and Five Hog or Mark Dane?
uh, see, I don't know. I mean, those guys would just they go to sit in the bar and have a chat. I think those guys
Okay,
would get
they
on. They'd
team
be
up.
yeah, they team up. They'd be good friends. But yeah, I mean, it was very different sort of kind of Sundance is very different kind of tonally. It was for me. People said to me, well, what kind of inspiration did you get? And I said, well, as long as like obviously like a lot of classic westerns, but Raiders of the Lost Ark was the kind of inspiration for me, like pulp action adventure kind of stuff, kicking off and that kind of thing. And so after I did the Sundowners series, that was kind of like my calling card. So I went to other publishers and I said, "Look, I did this. I can write a book. I people paid me for it, and it came out. It's a real thing. I must be good." And so that's how I got my kind of foot in the door with the other franchises. And so
Absolutely.
for a while, I was writing in other people's worlds, and that was good. I mean, that got my work exposure that it wouldn't have gotten otherwise. But after a few years of that, I started to think, well, as much fun as this is, at the end of the day, you have this box of toys that they give you, and they say, write a story with these characters and these worlds, but you have to hand it back at the end of the day. You can't change anything. You can't grow it appreciatively. You have to just kind of almost reset it back to zero. And I thought, I don't want to keep doing that. I want to do my own thing. And so I thought I'll try something different. And I've been doing a lot of science fiction and fantasy, and I thought, well, let's try something that is in a different genre. And my next favorite genre after sci-fi is I love sort of action thrillers. I love sort of espionage stuff, the kind of
Yeah.
Mission Impossible, Jason Bourne kind of thing.
Equalizer, Tom Clancy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all of that kind of thing. And so I thought, let's do something in that sort of sphere. And that was the genesis of me doing the Mark Dane stories, because he's the guy in the van. You know, you always see that in a spy movies. There's always the guy who's the door kicker and the trigger puller, right? And that's the guy who's kind of going in and doing the stuff. And then he's always on the radio kind of going to some guy, oh, okay, you know, can you hack that thing for me? Can you get this door open? Can you get me a satellite? Call in the drone strike. And that guy is always in a van somewhere on a computer, right? And I thought to myself, what if I told a story about the guy in the van having to do the other guy's job? And that's who Mark Dane is. He's the guy in the van who gets his team gets wiped out, and so suddenly he's the guy at the sharp end of things. He's the guy on the run having to deal with all this terrible stuff happening to him. And that was the genesis of that character. And once I started writing that was the start of the Mark Dane series. And that's been a lot of fun doing those, because it got me to write different styles and exercise different kind of writing muscles. And I've had a lot of fun doing those.
Speaking of those comic tie-ins and sabotaging, can we expect more from Commando Comics? I looked those up and it was like, wow, I'm really getting vibes of those Saboteur novels from.
Oh yeah, Commando is a fun thing, for British people. It's of a certain age, right? It's a thing from our childhood, right? It's those comic books. They're up to kind of 5,000 odd issues now, right? It's coming out sort of like they come out in groups of 4 every 2 weeks. They've been published in the UK since the 1960s, and they're still going. And they're these little kind of digest format.
Love Guns
books.
of Navarone type escapism.
Yeah, definitely. It's always that kind of two-fisted sort of kind of take that, you Nazi swine.
Indiana Jones, Great Escape.
Yeah. So all stuff like that. Great Escape, Indiana Jones, definitely 633 Squadron, Guns of Navarone. Operation Crossbow, Bridge Too Far. Any of those kind of classic war movies.
Yeah, here's a good one.
It's all of those kind of stories.
Do you think there's still going to be some Indiana Jones tie-in novels since they're doing the final movie now?
I was just complaining about that on Twitter today. Is that they have not done, or at least as I haven't seen it announced, they haven't done a tie-in novel for Dial of Destiny, and I'm like, where is it, man? Someone should write that.
They had some great comics.
Yeah, I mean the Indiana Jones stuff that's something
People love that world.
I'm a huge fan of that.
Yeah.
I bought all of the back in the 1990s. Bantam Books did these original novels, and I bought like every single one of those. and I absolutely hoovered up every single one of those because I love those stories. And nothing would give me more pleasure than to see Indy come back, because he's a timeless character, and the thing is Harrison Ford saying, well, okay, this is the last movie I'm going to do. Indiana Jones is going to retire, and it's like, I respect that. Thank you, sir, for giving us all these great movies. You go off and enjoy your retirement, but the character doesn't have to retire, right?
Yeah, we could still show his first absolute adventure even before the prequel TV show.
It's that we could still keep telling Indiana Jones stories in comic books and in video games and in novels. It's like he doesn't have to age out. And the thing is, because he's in that time period, because his stories are set in the past, it's timeless in its way, because it's always going to be set in that era. So you can tell more stories there, And I think that if we don't get that, I think the Lucasfilm are missing a trick there, because there's more stories to be told. It doesn't have to be movies.
That is so true. They missed it on Willow, where the movie was pretty popular. The show didn't quite click with everyone, and then they just all of a sudden just removed it. It's like, well, you've literally just thrown away all your money. You got to have all this stuff grow and keep testing the waters instead of getting pressured by fans who you don't agree with on social media.
We'll return after these messages.
Hello and welcome to Culture Shocked, the pop culture podcast brought to you by 4 aging millennials and our outdated opinions. Join us every Tuesday as we discuss movies, TV, games, and even music, new and old.
Dude, what do you think you're doing?
Are you seriously trying to record a promo without us right now?
Well, yeah?
Dude, you can't just do the promo by yourself. Who's gonna listen to that?
Yeah, and you probably haven't even told them that we're a pop culture podcast where we always agree on everything. For instance, the Sam Raimi trilogy, easily being the best of the Spider-Man movies.
No. But I think we can all agree that Jaws is a classical masterpiece.
Nope, don't like that. But we do all agree that the sequel trilogy of Star Wars is the best in the Skywalker saga, right, guys?
That comment is so ridiculous. I don't even know where to begin.
Anyways, that'll do it from all of us here at Culture Shock. Thanks for listening.
Hey, it's Brent Pope, the host of Breakfast with Brent Pope. You've seen me on some of your favorite TV shows saying things like, "Give it up, Jimmy. You got to sink this putt to win." On Breakfast with Brent Pope, I sit down with guests from the entertainment world, and we do it all over breakfast. Or should I say Brentfast? Every week on Brentfast, you get inside Hollywood info and tips, great breakfast recs and foodie debates. Most of all, you get the most delightful 30 minutes of your week. So dig in. It's Brentfast time. Listen at Brentfast.com, Apple Podcasts, or wherever fine podcasts are found.
Do you ever find yourself thinking about who would win in a fight between Goku and Superman? Hi, I'm James Gavsey, and on the Who Would Win show, me and my co-host Ray ignore anything important happening in the outside world and debate fictional battles between characters from comics, movies, and video games.
We got a new show every week, and almost always am I the winner.
Yeah, not true, Ray.
In the past, we've discussed such matches as Captain America versus Darth Vader, Solid Snake versus the Iron Giant, classic matchups like RoboCop versus Terminator, and even the Muppets versus Sesame Street.
That one was crazy. So if you're a fan of geek culture and love a spirited debate, check out the Who Would Win show wherever you get your podcasts, or check us out at whowouldwinshow.com.
We let things pile up in the DVR, we add them to our queues, we wait for the DVDs and Blu-rays. We time shift. The Time Shifters Podcast. Sci-fi, horror, fantasy, superheroes, comedy, action, film, television, maybe some not-so-current events. Find us on iTunes or at timeshifterspodcast.com.
Cool thing about Blind Knowledge is we are in multiple countries. We are worldwide all across the globe. We are in the US, we are in the UK, we are in Canada, Germany, India, Japan. We're in Australia, y'all. BlindKnowledge.com. Now back to the feature presentation.
I mean, it does. I mean, this whole thing, right, with Star Trek Prodigy just being taken off TV now as well, right? That seems like a weird decision to me, because I'm like, don't we now? We're supposed to live in the age now where anything you want to see, you can see it, right? So it should be there. And then they're just
encouraging more and more theft if they just keep having more of these cock blocking, so to speak, more of these barriers.
Yeah, because what are people going to do, right? If people can't find stuff, they're going to raise the black flag, right? They're going to run up the Jolly Roger. That's what they're going to do. It's going to be it's
and just
Jack Sparrow
no
time,
physical
right?
media. Yeah. Jack Sparrow's a perfect example. In fact, I'm surprised there wasn't even more Pirates of the Caribbean. They had so many mediocre games, but they were just asking for some cool comic book and book tie-ins.
Yeah, I mean, there were. I know there was some YA stuff that they did early on to tie in, like they did like some young Jack Sparrow novels and stuff.
But those were for 12 and under.
But Pirates of the Caribbean is a good example of a franchise that's sort of got a lot of legs to it. I see these worlds, these universes that give people a lot of love, and I think if there's an audience out there that wants to read those stories, if they want to see those characters come back, why shouldn't those people get the opportunity to have that?
Yeah, not only just embrace the fandom, but respect it. I have not checked out your Splinter Cell audiobooks yet. I'm just glad that that's still being acknowledged in one way, shape, or form, because there was a lot of tie-in books, and I couldn't always get into them because they kept just using this. There's like 3 different authors and who kept using a mutual name, and
that was a weird choice. That was the publisher, they had like a house name, so they would all be published under the name David Michaels, but it was like you say, it was like 3 different authors, which was kind of I thought it was a weird choice to me, that he's like, just say who it is. But
I knew last they said 2 years ago they were going to remake the first game, and then in retaliation the director of the original game left. So it's kind of a shame that Ubisoft hasn't cracked that code. I mean, they were talking about doing a movie for the longest time, and now that they're producing Mythic Quest for Apple, I mean, what's to stop them from doing an epic 8-part miniseries?
I mean, that there's the last I heard is that there is supposed to be an animated series in development.
Animated, oh,
and that was Derek Kolstad, who was the guy behind John Wick. When I was working on the novels, they said to me, okay, well, this is Netflix are working on this animated series, and I said, okay, well, where are my novels going to be set? And they said, well, we want you to set your novels before the animated series. So, that was always in the back of my mind when I was writing the two books that I worked on. I've seen some imagery from the animated series in development, and it looked really good. And I was like, this is great. I hope it goes ahead. But now they've been very quiet on it, so I have absolutely no idea what the status is on that.
Waiting's the hardest part, man.
I believe the Splinter Cell remake game, I believe that is still happening. I haven't heard anybody say anything bad that it's been cancelled or anything like that. As far as I know, that is still going ahead. So, I think that's going to be interesting to see how they update that game for kind of like the contemporary era, because it was like 2000 and something, 2003, I think, when the first game came out. So, I mean, I will, when the next Splinter Cell game comes out, you bet I will absolutely be there front and center to buy and play it, because it's when the funny thing is my publisher Aconite Books, who did the Splinter Cell books, the editor in chief,
they merged.
He came to me and he said, oh, we're working with Ubisoft. I just, and this was before it had been officially announced. He said, I want to let you know we're working with Ubisoft. And I just kind of grabbed him by the hand and I said, I want to do Splinter Cell. Straight away, I was like, I love Splinter Cell. If you're going to do Ubisoft stuff, if you're going to do that, if you're going to do Tom Clancy stuff, you call me first.
You're like Jack Nicholson, if you're a good man. You get me on that wall. You need me on that wall.
Yeah. And I was just like, push him up against the wall. You are going to hire me, or it will not go well for you, right? But no, he knew I was passionate about it, so he was like, yeah, absolutely.
If you don't hire me, then you hate the fan base. That's your pitch. That's your elevator pitch.
But yeah, I mean, it's that's been interesting to work with, because I've had a very kind of polar reaction from some of the fans on the Splinter Cell forums. Is that some of them really, really liked what I did and kind of could see what I was kind of coming from. And other people were like, no, we hate this. This is not the Splinter Cell that we want. And I'm like, well, okay, I respect that. I respect the choices there. Some people will find it's not to their taste. I'm like, that's fine. I'm not going to argue about that. It's, there's still plenty of other material out there. And I can understand the kind of how Splinter Cell fans are a bit salty because they haven't been treated well. They have this game franchise, and then the character, guest stars in other people's games, and it's like, I know what you want. You just want a Splinter Cell game. So do I. But it's like, every time Ubisoft have an announcement, it's like, are they going to announce the Splinter Cell game? And they don't. And it's like, oh, okay, maybe next time then, But it's, hopefully it's coming.
I would hope, because like you say, it's just, you want some kind of element of respect,
Yeah. I mean, it is difficult because these companies, they know that anything they say is going to be like the wrong thing, because you're going to upset somebody. So if you say a game is coming, you're going to upset somebody. If you say a game is not coming, you're going to upset something. So at the end of the day, you don't say anything, and then you upset somebody because you don't say anything. And it's like there's no right answer that you can give.
Absolutely. And it's just best to walk away from that chat. It was like, if we're not here to actually have a big detailed chat, this is already the wrong sauce. Come to me when we're actually going to sit down and talk instead of play phone tag or, I would be remiss and if I didn't have answer other fans' questions on how you got associated with the modern day Doctor Who and Stargate franchise.
So the Doctor Who stuff. So that my involvement in that came from working with the audio guys. Is the same company that did the Judge Dredd audio drama I talked about earlier, Big Finish Productions. Those guys also are very well known for doing these Doctor Who stories where they took characters from the shows who had left the show by that point, and we're doing, okay, we're going to bring them back and we're going to tell further stories with these earlier iterations of the Doctor. And so they gave me the opportunity to write for that. And that was great. Again, it was like, writing about characters that I'd enjoyed watching on TV as a kid. It's like, oh, now I get to kind of put words in their mouth and write stories for them. So I had fun working on that. And off the back of that, I got the opportunity to do a Doctor Who novel for what was the current Doctor at the time, which was David Tennant, who of course now is coming back.
Yeah, and by popular request, it's been over 10 years.
Yeah, and so I got to kind of do two things I really enjoyed, which is writing a Doctor Who story and setting it in the Old West. So I went back to kind of some of the
back to your Western tropes. Nice.
For some of the stuff I was inspired by Sundowners, and so I went back and I told a Doctor Who in the Old West story.
Have you ever been asked to also narrate some of your books?
I don't know if I could. I don't think I'm not that good of a voice actor. Yeah. I mean, I know some writers do that. I think I have a friend who does voiceovers for books, and he talks about how it's like 20 or 30 hours worth of work. And I thought, I don't know if I could do that, man. I think it would just wear me out,
Yeah.
But as for Stargate, that was an interesting thing. That was a young lady who's working for the company that started doing the rights. She was looking for writers, and I heard about this, and I said, well, I was watching the show. I was a fan of the show, and I said, what are you looking for? And she said, well, they needed a Stargate Atlantis novel at the time, and I said, well, I like that show. And she said, oh, okay, can you pitch some ideas? And that was it. And they were very open to new writers. They had a very aggressive publishing schedule at the time. They were like, we just want to get as many people in, get as many cool ideas going, and so I had the opportunity to do a few things for them. I did a couple of Stargate Atlantis novels. I did a Stargate SG-1 novel, and when Stargate Universe
you did
came down the line,
trio. That was great.
They asked me to novelize the pilot episode of that, which was
and that's coming back. Did you hear about that?
Yeah, I mean, Stargate's one of those franchises
now. MGM.
That's one of those franchises where it's like, there's a ton of material there, right? It's like, why is that show? I mean, I don't know if that show is it on a streamer somewhere? Because it should be.
I was meaning to tell you that earlier. I've seen I in the past when we've done sci-fi sit downs, I've seen people complain, why is it not on network TV? And it's like, well, here's the thing. Networks still don't have sci-fi figured out. Even Sci-Fi Channel is now in cancel mode. After 2 years, they want some new content. They don't want to stay with the same vibe after a while. So streaming's pretty much the way to go. And now that Amazon bought MGM for $1 billion, and they reformed the whole Epix cable channel and streaming platform, anything's possible.
So is Stargate on Amazon right now then? Because I don't have Amazon Prime.
It's streaming on Netflix and Prime still on and off. It shows up on Hulu, all free shows, and I don't recommend the Hulu ones because they seem to use bad quality HD TV rips.
But I mean, it's good though that the show's out there. I mean, I think
Michael Shanks even said in an interview about 5 years ago, he's like, I can't believe it's still big because it hadn't been syndicated for that long. And the DVD sets were still getting pricey, and still people have introduced their kids to it. We are supposed to be living in an on-demand world, right? And I like the idea of the fact that I could kind of wake up tomorrow morning and go, you know what, I fancy watching all of Stargate SG-1 again. Where is that? And I can push a button and go, here it is. And I don't have to kind of dig through my DVD collection for it, or absolutely. And the actors have become bigger since. I've introduced people who are fans of more recent work starring a lot of the Atlantis guys, including Momoa. So it's just funnier just saying, it's like, this is what they were doing before they got to the 5th or 6th stage of their career.
Yeah, it's funny actually. I was watching an episode of Atlantis, and Jason Momoa is kind of it was one of the ones where he'd been introduced to the show, and I thought, oh wow, there he is, kind of like at the start of his career. Now he's this big movie star, and just seeing him in like really Fast X and everything, It's just it's incredible to see these people at the different stages of their career. And I think the thing about Stargate, what it reminds me of the most is it reminds me of how I enjoyed the original Star Trek when I was younger. It has that same kind of joy and fun and energy to it, as characters going off and having adventures, and you can see they're having a good time doing it. And I really like that about that show, because you have contemporary characters.
I thought people of it from the same way, kind of. The original
people from the everyday world in that sort of crazy science fiction universe. I think that's a great idea.
The first era in the 90s was kind of original series, and Next Gen. Atlantis was Deep Space Nine, and Universe was kind of Voyager.
Yeah, I mean, it breaks my heart that they never got to resolve that show. Is that those poor guys are still out there on that ship on the Destiny out there in the middle of deep space. They never brought them back. In
my mind, they made it. but they don't like the answers. They don't like.
Yeah, I mean, I think if they brought Stargate back, it would be kind of cool to go like, just send a ship out there and bring those people.
Don't
back.
even call it SG1 or anything. Have all three characters intersect. I mean, because that's what Universe did pretty well. They would have some of the, much like the Star Trek shows, they would have characters from the other shows appear, but non-intrusively.
Yeah. I mean, it's, and everybody's all over that stuff now, right? Since the MCU kind of went like, look, this is how you do
this was our original cinematic universe.
Yeah. I mean, but if you go back and, Star Trek and Stargate were doing that way before Marvel started doing that in movies.
Was doing it with Law and Order and Homicide, and even X-Files. Have you heard of the Valverde universe?
Oh, is you mean from the Republic of Valverde from...
Yeah, Predator 2 and Die Hard 2 and even Commando.
I have a T-shirt with that Viva La Republic of Valverde written on the front of that.
One. That's apparently the same truck company in the Die Hard movies is also in the Speed movies, and of course Predator crossed over with Alien, and Ridley Scott confirmed that the Android company in Blade Runner is the same one.
Cool. If you read my Splinter Cell novel, the airline from Die Hard 2 is in my Splinter Cell novel.
No way!
Yeah, I did that as a little Easter egg. I like putting jokes like that in for people. So
I will check that out. That is
just a little in reference there. If you know your action movies, you'd be like, it's that particular the airline that John McClane's wife is on turns up in my Splinter Cell novel.
Well, they meant to make 24 part of the Die Hard saga. I think they still could with comics and books crossovers.
Yeah.
I applaud you and David Mack for also thanking the Wicca, because it is very confusing, and those guys were taking big notes to where you're like, okay, that's the agent's name. Sorry, I knew the actor, I didn't know their name.
Oh yeah, tell me about it. I mean, I was lucky to do the 24 novel. I could not have done that without a legion of diligent fans keeping all of those notes in order. I mean, I've been watching 24 since the beginning, but it's like I can't remember it all. And I'm glad that somebody out there is helping out tie-in writers like me.
My mother would do that when I would watch some of those shows like Rosalian Isles, all the Law and Orders, Luther, and some of the other procedurals. And she's like, "What's that one with that one blonde actress?" I'm like, "You got to be more specific. Are you talking closer? Are you talking?
You got to narrow it down for
on
me. Battlestar.
What blonde badass are you talking about?"
We had a lot of fun doing the 24 novels, when that was so that was David Mack, myself, and Dayton Ward, and we were all working with an editor who was a close friend of ours.
Ward for me. He's doing good stuff too.
Yeah, he's a great guy. And we were working with an editor called Marco Palmieri, who we worked with on the Star Trek lines before. And he came to us and he's like, "Look, I know you guys love 24. The publisher I'm working with, we have the rights to do this follow-on from, it was gonna sync up with the Live Another Day series. So it's like, can you do some stories that are set before
Actually,
that
I knew
series?
That. I did. For whatever reason, I thought you meant Legacy, and I was like, I would have liked to see a book on.
No, it was before. So this was before.
But when he went to London,
story.
So I own both those books, and
which is fun for me as well. That season, like kind of having Jack Bauer come to my hometown was kind of cool, And
then even get some great directors who had worked on stuff like Spooks, known as MI5 over here.
Yeah,
that would be a cool crossover. Technically, they're both owned by Fox. Sky.
Well, it's like I think did I do it in the end? I think I was gonna put a Spooks reference in my 24 novel, but I couldn't find a place
Pierce
for it.
assigns Bauer, hey, you get a free asylum. But
I don't think Harry Pierce would get on very well with Jack Bauer's kind of style of being
I know, but I just mean like he just comes to his office saying there's a mole here, yada yada. I'm not sure if it's MI6 or if it's CIA or even an FBI renegade, or maybe it's the Russians again, those damn Russians.
Because when they gave me the job for that, it was originally they were saying to me like, "Do you want to write more than one?" And I was like, "I don't have the time to do more than one novel." And we had a whole idea about talking about doing more of them.
And those were better. Like those, both you and Mack and Ward's books gave me so much more hope for the franchise, because instead of previous novels had been kind of hit and miss, where they it's like they were kind of getting into even more political arguments, and it didn't sound like stuff the characters would do. And you guys kind of just wisely said, like so-and-so walks in with a shit-eating grin. So-and-so has an oh shit look on their face. It's like stuff that, only visually can, come across. And it's like, see, that's what we need. I want to know what's people even still want to know what happens next with even Chloe and Tony Almeida.
Oh yeah, you know.
In my mind, Jimmy Smits became president in that final season, and then Eric became a Secret Service agent. He's going to team up with Agent Pierce to free Bauer from Russia.
When they gave me the job, they said, like, you know, look, you're going to write the first book out of the gate, so can you write the
show? No pressure.
Can you kind of start? You know, can you kind of set the brief they gave me is they said, can you just say what happens to Jack after the end of the previous season? And if you remember that season, the last shot is Jack looking up, and it's like his face on a camera, and he's like, a drone's looking down at him, and Chloe's like, what's going to happen to Jack? And he's like, he's going to go on the run, and everybody and their dog are chasing him, right? And it's like, and that's the way the season ends, right? And so I said, right, okay, I'm going to pick up like 1 hour later, and it's like, what happens? How does he get out of the US? You know, what's the last thing he does before he disappears, if he goes off the radar forever? And that's what Deadline, that's what the story was about. But the thing was, I didn't have a lot of time to write it. My editor said to me, well, you know, if you can't meet the deadline, you know, literally the deadline for Deadline, if you can't meet the deadline, you know, you can't do the book. And so I wrote that book in 48 days. And that's the fastest I've ever written anything in my career. And I just kind of like, you know, I pulled all-nighters for the best part, week after week. And I think I kind of channeled the energy of Jack Bauer, you know, because I was on a clock the same way that he was, you know. And all of that kind of, I think, shows in that book. And I had such a fun time doing it. And then Dave comes in, and Dave's book Rogue is kind of like, you know, that's a cool story about, you know, you see a different aspect of Jack's past there. And then Dayton did Trial by Fire, which was basically, that's kind of almost like the Jack Bauer origin story novel. It's just like, you know,
yes,
really great work. And
I think everyone's looking for more of that, because they were talking about doing an origin show and no one could agree on it. And then it was just going to be kind of a pissing match with the fandom, where it's like, well, who can we get who looks like Jack Bauer? Because, you know, it's a hard role to fill. Just like James Bond.
I mean, I would, you know, what the last thing we see is him, like, he's dragged off to Russia, right? And I'm like, well, that, you know, you could do that story, you know, even if Keith Sutherland doesn't want to come back and do it as a TV show, you know, that's a novel that you could write. And and I know a lot of people didn't like 24 Legacy. I thought it was a good effort. I thought they did a good job trying to kind of
at least like Treadstone
reboot the show.
Identity, just build the world more, show that there's more than just one, you know, sleeper agent.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, you know, 24 is Kiefer Sutherland, right? A lot of people just can't disconnect those two things.
Just like James Bond, this era is the golden age. In fact, speaking of Bond, is there any hope of doing another Bond novel? Because they had some for a while during Craig's era.
I mean, what's the? I don't know what the
going on Ian Fleming's old scripts.
I mean, there's I think that Anthony Horowitz, the guy who did those ones, I think that he's kind of come to the end of doing his now. There was a new novella that came out just recently, which was actually written to kind of coincide with King Charles's coronation. And that was and it's actually a novel about a guy who's trying to assassinate King Charles before he gets the crown. And it's set in the modern day, and that's kind of it's only quite it's pretty good fun, actually. I read it's called On His Majesty's Secret Service.
Oh, there you
go. By Charlie Hickson. That's a fun book. I don't know if they're going to do any more past that. There is another writer, Kim Sherwood. She is writing novels which are kind of set in the Bond universe, but they're not about Bond.
Oh, and sweet!
It's about like the other 00 agents. So the first book starts like James Bond has gone missing, presumed dead. And it's like the other agents are like kind of, well, where has he gone? What's going on? And who are these people? So it's more like, in a lot of ways, it reminded me a lot of Spooks. It's about a team of, you know, 00 agents kind of working together. So it's not just focused on one character. And her first book, Double or Nothing, that one's come out quite recently. I think she's going to do a couple more.
That's neat. Well, since you're such a fan of some of these other espionage, I have some good notes. Did you ever see that hit movie Spy Game?
Oh yeah, that was a terrific movie. Yeah.
Apparently, the screenwriter of that, who also worked on the similar Sniper series, he gets paid each time they make a sequel to that '90s movie. The author Michael Frost Beckner, he teamed up with Beacon Pictures, who actually owned the rights. Universal was just a distributor, so he actually, because they made so many changes, you know, at just insistence, it's just part of the Hollywood compromise. He decided, here's my version based on my original draft. I'm going to make it a book trilogy. And it's just came out now. The Spy Hards podcast even interviewed him, and man, he was giving some juicy details. It's like, like he lives and breathes espionage.
It wasn't it. I mean, Spy Game. I mean, so that was the Brad Pitt movie, right? I think
that. Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if this is true. I remember someone telling me that was the movie that Pitt turned down Jason Bourne to do.
Yes, they confirmed a lot of the stuff, and they even got even more detailed on how just everyone was unsure about it and just back and forth. Who was going to play the leads and how was it even going to end? And the hardest part was just making all the dialogue fit without being dull or too much exposition. That was their main pickle.
I guess, you know, I mean, you think about that, it'd be interesting to imagine the Bourne Identity with Brad Pitt in that role instead of Matt Damon. But then, I mean, as I understand
both in Ocean's 11 around the same time. Investors were crazy at that time.
And then, you know, but then I suppose, you know, if you think of like Pitt saying, well, I'm going to do this other movie because I get to work with Robert Redford, and it's like, yeah, you can understand why an actor would make a choice like that.
The original Condor, I get to be mentored by him.
Yeah, I mean, and that is like, you know, you've mentioned a terrific movie there. You know, the original 3 Days of the Condor, you know, based on what the novel 6 Days of the Condor. That is a great piece of spy thriller storytelling. You know, I mean, I know they did a TV series kind of modern updating of it, which I watched a few episodes. I thought it was okay, but you know, I just think it doesn't hold a candle to the original.
Sorry.
The Condor, did you see that? The TV show?
Yeah.
Like the modern day updating of
that was
3 Days of the Condor.
Yeah, that was more like the Americans. That was related in Condor only.
Yeah, very different beast. I mean, there was another show that did a similar sort of thing, Rubicon, which had James Badge Dale in it. That was
there you go.
Very slow burn show. You know, you really had to kind of pay attention to that.
I remember we saw that when that came out, and we were like, "This is so good, but it's not going to make it past the season because it's just too complex and it doesn't have the patience that we do."
Yeah, I mean, I remember watching that and thinking, this feels like a novel for television. This is really dense. And it's like, you know, you have to kind of really pay attention to what's going on.
There's hope, especially with Jack Ryan season 4 finally concluding.
I just saw the first 2 episodes of that preview screening this week, actually.
Oh, man.
And it was great. It was at the London Action Festival. They had the first 2 episodes, and Wendell Pierce was there doing a Q&A.
Isn't he amazing? He has done all kinds of ethnicities, and here he is, you know, playing a Black Muslim who's also having to, you know, be the boss. And, you know, again, you know, just it does all the. It's gone for so many showrunners and somehow still kept up the pace. You know, that's dedication.
It really feels like as well. It's like that's. I mean, I can't say anything about it, obviously, for spoiler reasons. But I will say this: is it feels like classic kind of spy stuff. You know, just that sort of Cold War era, real kind of pressure cooker sort of.
Everyone is breaking a sweat and going, "What happens next?"
Yeah, you know, I mean, it was so. You know, we watched the first 2 episodes back to back, and I was like, at the end of it, I was like, "Oh, damn! Now I've got to wait until the end of the month."
Same way. I was battling insomnia when season 3 came out, and it was just one of those where I'm like, I really got to go to bed or I will have a headache. I'm like, well, no, I accept my fate. This is a great show.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of that. Definitely. That's, you know, very excited about that.
Absolutely. They cracked the code. No pun intended. So you've given some hints on your upcoming projects and everything, and given more than plenty of advice. Obviously the sky's the limit. What kind of sky are you breezing through now that you're being the superstar?
Oh, that's nice of you to say that. Well, right now, so my publishing company just got bought out by another big publisher. So everything is kind of ground to a halt while everybody figures out what the hell is going on. So, I have a couple of projects that are kind of in the hopper, but until everybody decides what they're doing and where it's going, there's like nothing that I can officially announce. So I suddenly found myself with a bit of free time, which is really great. So I've been working on a couple of small projects. Like I said, I finished the Rivers of London comic book, and yes. I've written another Commando comic book, which is going to be coming out later in the year.
I saw you had some 2 one-offs that are coming out also.
Yeah, and so my latest standalone novel, that's Dark Horizon, that just came out last month. that just came out in hardback and ebook and an audiobook. And that is doing really well. A lot of people are saying really great things about it. I'm very pleased with it. It's a bit different from my Mark Dane novels, where they're kind of more globe-trotting kind of action adventure, Mission Impossible kind of style things. The Dark Horizon is much more kind of close focus. It's very much in that sort of like pressure cooker kind of mold. And I had a lot of fun writing that. It was one of those things where I just sort of said, here's an idea I had years ago. Maybe I could make it work. And my editor said, well, we need another book from you. What do you got? I got this idea. I'm not sure if it'll work. He's like, I like that. Do that.
Yeah.
And so I kind of just threw myself into it. It was one of those things where I wasn't sure if it would work at the beginning, but once I got into it, I found the kind of the sweet spot, and now it's done pretty well. So I'm hoping that will the audiences will really enjoy that, and that will carry
what are
through.
you currently binging?
So
gaming?
what have I watched recently? So yesterday I just watched The Mother, that movie with is Jennifer Lopez.
Lawrence,
with
but J-Lo, it's all good. Oh, The Mother. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
the one where J-Lo is assassin.
Yeah, J-Lo. So J-Lo doing basically kind of Jane Wick. You know, it's like it seems like it seems like there's
Do you
a lot
think
of
there'll
these
be
movies.
some John Wick novels? There was a prequel comic.
I think the thing about John Wick is so kinetic, right? It's hard to do that justice on the printed page. Maybe in a comic book you can make it work, but I think a novel would have.
There's a great
would be
comic I
difficult.
think you'd love that shows how he first met Lady J in a deadly encounter.
But yeah, so I watching that, and what have I watched? So I've been watching a lot of action movies. I just saw Kandahar with Gerard Butler, which that got really bad reviews, but I liked it.
Yeah.
I don't know if that means maybe my taste isn't that great. Critics
I'm into a lot of
they hate
stuff like
stuff, and
Syriana and the Kingdom, but it seems like it was for that crowd, and a lot of people were just getting bored. And they're like, we want him to blow stuff up every minute. And it's like, that's not what this movie is.
Yeah, I mean, you know, my taste in action movies, I like. I won't lie. I mean, I love the Fast and the Furious movies, and those are just like crazy comic book, shiny, glittery fun.
Expendables has reignited its franchise coming out.
But at the same time, you know, I like watching movies with just like, you know, that might have some grit or guts in them. Like I watched The Raid 2 again recently. If you've seen the Raid movies, those movies are just crazy.
Indonesia.
With the incredible fight scenes, you know, directed by this Welsh guy, Gareth Evans. You know, he's just amazing director. Did some fantastic stuff. So I've been ping-ponging around a lot of different things, but mostly it's just been different kinds of action movies what I've been mainlining recently.
Stellar. The Equalizer, I'm convinced, is going to probably get to 5 movies total.
Yeah.
Unless they want to wrap this up. It's like, this is it. And speaking of which, people were noting how that's a Man on Fire reunion. And me and my buddies we are huge Man on Fire fans. We always thought, you know, even though it was based on a book, we wanted to know more about that other Denzel character, John Creasy's CIA background, because it was just so fascinating. You don't get to see it on screen.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird that they never did a sequel to that. But having said that, I mean, I'm glad to see that there's like we're going to get him playing an action role again with Equalizer 3, which I mean, I saw the trailer for that and I thought that looks like it's going to be cool.
I will take your word for it. I always go in without seeing the trailer because, you know, it's not produced in studio anymore. Half the time, it's just a bunch of, you know, guns for hire who just, you know, go for the movie with the footage provided and try to make it look like something it's not. So.
Yeah. I mean, see, for me, I love the trailers when I go to the movie theater. I'd always love to see those because I like
I did back in the day.
It hypes me up, right? It excites me. But you know, Don LaFontaine doing that. But in a world where you know something bad will happen, it's just hear that guy's voice.
The fan at extreme.
And one man can save the world. You know,
one man, one ranger, one gun. One bullet.
I mean, I'm such a sucker for that stuff. Really, I watch. Oh my god, this will be the most awesome movie ever. You know, I
love it when they actually get a proper song in there, or they'd even pull a Deadpool where the trailer is its own star.
Yeah, you know, have you seen the audio notes thing about how to do an action movie trailer?
No.
Okay, so if you look this up when we finish talking, this is a bunch of guys. They're called the Oral Nauts. So it's AURALNAUTS, and they did this YouTube video where they describe how to do like a trailer for an action movie or like a Marvel.
I think I see it.
And it's just this black screen where they just do a voiceover and they show you how to cut together an action movie trailer with the audio and everything. It's so brilliantly well observed. And after you've seen it, you will never be able to watch an action movie trailer again because it is exactly dead on. These guys just dismantle how it's done, but it's such a brilliant piece of work. It really
That's
is.
lovely. He's kind of like Rick Beto, who studies every song and does the whole, why does this song work? Why does the bass highlight it? Why does the lyrics ignite interest? To deconstruct everything and strip it down that's a talent in of itself.
And I love that kind of stuff, because I was always the kid who wants to know how the magic trick gets done, not because I feel like, I want to know the secret,
actors,
but it's because I want to I want to understand how I can do it. I want to learn how that stuff operates. So I think once you see that, once you learn how people do how they achieve their own kind of creative art, it can help you in your own creative art.
Absolutely. Man, oh man. So you you were locked and loaded. I can see you doing a mock image of yourself with the Commando movie poster, and then you got like an eraser, a printer, a computer typewriter.
Remember when I said I'd kill you last? I lied.
I lied. Remember when I said I'd end the story? I lied.
There's going to be a sequel. Come on, come with me now.
There you go. Arnold Schwarzenegger's just ignited interest. You could do a John Matrix prequel novel with all the tongue-in-cheek stuff for a change.
Let's do a sequel, right? John Matrix, like 20, 30 years later, he's an old man now, but he's come out of retirement, for he's one last fight. I watched Arnie's show Fubar. Actually, I thought that was a lot of fun.
It was so much fun, and
he's definitely having the best time making that show.
I'm convinced that the Kennedys, who own half the corporation, said, "Make sure you bash the show without even actually watching it." How about his ex-wife Maria is still bitter, but yeah. I mean, there's was even talk at one point of I think they were thinking of doing like a Rambo versus Predator comic, and I always thought Rambo was, since it started out as a book, would have been a great continuing book franchise, but never.
Well, I mean, if you ever read the original novel, First Blood it's a much
it doesn't survive.
It's a very different book as well. I mean, even the movie is very gritty as well. It's like it's not the franchise that it became. I mean, to me, that's I mean, not that those movies don't have their appeal or anything, but to me, the quintessential Rambo is that version in First Blood.
No, that's fine. I'm kind of the same way, where it's just like everyone goes crazy about certain franchises, and it's like, yeah, but the original movie is like the lightning in a bottle.
It's true. How many people talk about the Fast and the Furious movies where they were boosting DVDs in the first movie, and now they're traveling into space, and it's like, well, it is what it is. And
I heard a rumor they want to deconstruct it and bring it back to reality. I'm like, then what was even the point of breaking reality?
Yeah. That's the thing is once you go big, well, then you have to keep going bigger and bigger, right? It's like, how do you draw it back down?
Through Tom Cruise into space, I'm sure they'll probably kill him off and pass it on to someone else, but so he can do more Top Gun movies, but there's just no telling.
I mean, there's a kind of point of no return. I mean, the mission movies, right? I love those, and watching the last couple, you think, oh, they're going to bring Jeremy Renner in now. It's like, nope, no, that's not going to happen. He's going to be in it for a couple of movies and he's going to go away. And it's like, okay. And I keep thinking, are they going to bring all of the other characters who've been in Mission Impossible movies and then like they haven't come back for the sequels? I would love to see like Maggie Q come back in. I always thought her character was great.
They got Henry Cerny confirmed, and Angela Bassett was going to be in it from the onset. So,
and apparently, I forget the actor's name, but the guy who played the unfortunate CIA agent in the first movie who Tom Cruise makes him vomit.
Yeah.
The guy, you remember the guy in the computer room?
Yeah,
when he gets winched in. No, not Emilio Estevez. No, the guy at the end of the movie. The guy who's like literally the dude working on the computer in the room.
Oh, that would be hysterical. He's like, oh man, my nightmare from hell. He's back.
Yeah, and he's the guy they said at the end. He's like, I want him manning a radar tower in Alaska by the end of the day, right? And that guy gets cashiered. they're bringing that guy back for the next Mission Impossible movie.
Yeah,
I thought that's such a deep cut callback. It's so cool.
They really did screw the pooch. You thought that Maggie Q, Jonathan Rhys Meyers, and company were going to come back, and they like had him listed as dead in like a scene that was in the MI4 trailer, but of course Ving Rhames came back for a cameo, and so it's like, I do wonder, is like what can they do? And it's like it doesn't take much to just say, hey, thought dead but still alive.
I mean, as character, if I could pick just one character from the Mission franchise who I would love to see come back, it's just one person, Stanley Wayne Newton. I would love to see.
That would be cool.
The character she played, is it Naya Nordorf Hall from the second movie? I know the second movie doesn't get a lot of love, but
she could now be a spy instead of a criminal thief.
Yeah, and the thing is like, the emotion in that is her and Ethan's character. They fell in love in that story, and then they went their separate ways. And I would love to see the two of them come back, especially with like where Ethan's character is now in the later films, is just to have Naya return and have that moment of the two of them in the same room. It's like, okay, well, we're different people now. Yeah, we had a thing once, but we've got to go off and do some cool action stuff. And I would love to see her come back, even if it was just to kind of, if she hands him a dossier and says like, I hope you're doing okay, and she walks off, I'd love to see her do that, just because I think she's a fantastic actress, and I thought it was a really cool character, and I think it would be a nice way to kind of
just reunited. That would be good.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe. I mean, we've got 2 more movies to go before they tie up the franchise, so who knows? It could happen.
Absolutely. You have been more than gracious with your time, and I hope this year just keeps pumping. I hope you keep finding some other fun stuff. Be part of other franchises before people even realize they're a franchise.
Well, thank you, man. I've really enjoyed our chat today as well. It's like I always say about this is
it's a human
I'm lucky
chat. I don't want it to be scripted.
I get to do what I love for a living, right? and it's always cool for me to sort of share that. I like to share that love. I like to share that enthusiasm, and if I can encourage other people to sort of carry this on as a career, then I say go for it.
Absolutely. I mean, I can see so many other franchises even just continuing as books. Anything from Terminator to Battlestar is like everything is out there in some capacity. I'm surprised we weren't even attached to Blade Runner at one point. It's just, you respect just intelligence. The viewers love both your original and your tie-in stuff, and kudos to anyone who can conquer all kinds of markets and be happy about all their contributions instead of, well, that was payday, or well,
the thing is, what it comes down to is I'm a fan of this stuff, and I enjoy it, and I get a lot of love out of it. I get a lot of enjoyment out of it, and I think if I wasn't, I wouldn't put that much energy into it, because you can't. I don't think you can be true to these franchises if you don't care about it, because then it is just a payday. Then you are just phoning it in. And I think if there are people out there who have done that, there are tie-in stuff. You can read it and you go, well, this guy doesn't really get whatever it is. I don't want to be that guy. I would never work on a franchise. If someone said to me, work on this thing, and I'm like, I don't like that show, I couldn't do justice to it. Give it to somebody who loves it.
It's so true. I see so many people who get roped into it, and it's like, or you even see directors guest starring on an episode, and they're like, I've never watched an episode. I'm like, well, that's why you're not going to get along with the main crew today, because they're going to correct you on stuff. I mean, it doesn't take much to just watch one.
It comes down to like show respect for the material, because that's what the fan base wants.
Well, that, and obviously fans are always going to argue, but if you can prevent an argument before it happens, definitely do that. Oh man. So you rock this, my dude, and I wish nothing but good fortune for you. So
you too. Thanks again, Cam. I really appreciate it.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening.
It's a jacked up review show.